And what I'm going to be talking about is, faith communities and how they can support veterans, why that's important. Ashley, next slide, please. So what we're going to do, we're going to give you an understanding of the role that faith communities play, but also give you some ideas on how communities can support veterans, some practical things. Okay, back to there we go. Oops, no, back the other direction. There we go. I'm also going to introduce you to the Be Connected Faith Network. It's an initiative that we launched last June to engage faith communities in a network of sharing ideas, etc. And then you're going to hear some practical ideas on how to form a veteran ministry, including an interview with Suzanne, who has done that recently. Next slide. So, challenges veterans face. Those of you who are dealing with veterans know this, but one of the challenges is isolation. There's fear of large crowds, overstimulation, noise issues, internal struggles, dealing with the stages of loss of friends, etc. Necessary actions that cause moral injury when you're in combat. Feeling disconnected, because one of the things I learned in being in the Navy, I was on a ship for 2 cruises off the coast of Vietnam, and I'm still connecting with 6 other people that were on that ship every month. So you get a really close relationship. Well, you lose that sometimes when you get out. There are employment and education issues, there are family challenges, and of course, physical, emotional, and spiritual trauma to deal with. Next slide. So I want to make a little distinction between PTSD and moral injury, because where faith communities tend to come in is primarily in the area of moral injury, although they can help them in all areas, of course. Many of the pastors and many are trained in counseling, and many faith communities have counseling programs. But when I look at PTSD, it's people who have experienced or witnessed a traumatic event, such as a natural disaster, combat, war. It tends to be related to fear of death or serious injury. And it gets pretty much programmed, from what I'm learning about it now, into the body itself, into the mind, into the nervous system. Moral injury is something else. It's been around ever since the Peloponnesian Wars, and I'm sure that Caesar's troops dealt with this too. It's a relatively recent term. It's used to describe a crisis that warriors have faced for centuries. It's internal suffering that results in doing something against your moral code, either voluntarily or being forced to do that, or not doing something that you feel you should have done. It's a conscience wound, a spiritual wound. That's where faith communities can help. Next slide. This is just a slide that just shows kind of those of you who are working with veterans and those of you in the faith communities. Here's what you might see with PTSD. That startle reflex, memory loss, fear, flashbacks, anxiety, and avoidance. That's pretty unique to PTSD. Moral injury, it's a soul wound. So you have grief, regret, shame, alienation, loss of purpose. And then they both have symptoms of anger, repressed trauma, and repressed moral injury can pop out in anger, of course. Depression, anxiety, insomnia, nightmares, self-medication. Next slide. Okay, this is information about hopefully encouraging you and your faith communities to help veterans with their spirituality. So what happens is spirituality can improve post-traumatic outcomes, can reduce the behavioral risks. It can deal with, for example, the churches can help with some of those 10 determinants of social determinants of health, for example. Expand the social support through involvement in spiritual communities. Feelings of isolation can be reduced. Coping skills can be added. The relaxation response through prayer and meditation. I've been meditating before my prayer since 1972. I got back from the Navy in 1970. Although I wasn't, quote, shot at, I was fairly safe. It did leave me with some wounds, and really helped me to do transcendental meditation, in my case, before prayer. It puts the veterans among caring individuals. Welcoming faith communities can be such a warm connection for our veterans. Suzanne may be talking a little bit about that. We've had a couple meetings with our veterans at Lady of Joy, and we've seen that. They can also provide emotional support. Next slide, please. Here's what we call a pathway to healing. Many service members, and they view people of faith, including members, as confidential, trusted sources of support. Chaplains, I've talked to a lot of chaplains, and there's that confidentiality that veterans can talk to chaplains without the chaplain ever saying what they talked about. So it's confidential. And so studies have shown that veterans are 5 times more likely to approach a faith leader, like a chaplain or a faith leader in a community, than their mental health professionals. Fostering a sense of belonging, it brings them back to that community. I know in my faith community, I immediately joined a faith community. I was estranged, shouldn't say immediately, I was estranged for about a year. And then I did join and connected and volunteered, and it brought me back to that connection that I had with really good people in the Navy. The spiritual connection can help provide hope, reduce isolation, and provide other healthy behaviors. Next slide. As far as veterans coming back, particularly in the early stages of reintegration, they're very cautious about who they connected to. We supported a Lutheran chaplain, and basically his wife got ripped off in a Visa card deal, and he was gone. We were supporting, but they're very cautious about organizations that they deal with. Faith communities have an open and caring, and they can be trusted. They also have ministries in place. But I want to emphasize, those of you who don't have veteran ministries in your church and your faith community, don't worry too much about that. You don't really need to have a formal ministry. We really want to have at least one champion who's attended the Be Connected training, the 2-hour training, so that the pastors and other people in the parish, when they see some of these situations and some of these behaviors, they have a go-to to help them deal with that. And many of the faith communities already have things in place. Many of your faith communities actually have spiritual counseling, and they have youth, they have places for families, they have gatherings, they have volunteer opportunities that can really help the veteran and their families connect. The veteran faith communities are in a much better position, really, than therapists typically to deal with the spiritual wounds, although the VA is starting to get into that now, fortunately. Next slide. Some of the opportunities, these are just examples from my experience and the ministries I've been in. First thing is visible prayers. We actually had announcements in the Church of Minnesota every Sunday praying for the veterans. But if your church can at least do that on veteran holidays and that sort of a thing, that's great. We created a prayer board which had, it went up and there was nobody on there at first, but we had a little note that said, check with the secretary if you want to put a relative there. So pretty soon we had a lot of service members and veterans on there. We started with just deployed veterans, and then we opened it up for any veterans. You can send care packages. You can have send-offs. I'll show a picture of one we did. We also adopted at our church, it was the Catholic Church of Minnesota, but we adopted a Lutheran pastor. We adopted a couple of evangelical pastors. And I'll tell you how that all worked. That was really fulfilling for us. You can have a military family support team. We would, with the families, we would get a couple of people to support that family. You know, they would do babysitting so that the spouse could get out and about, things like that. And we always had reminders. In our bulletin board, we also had prayers for peace in addition to the prayers for the veterans and deployed service members. Next slide. Yeah, this is our evangelical chaplain, and he was a Marine vet from First Gulf. He went into the Minnesota National Guard as a chaplain. And when we brought him in to tell him what we were going to do, this Marine vet had tears in his eyes. And he says, I suppose you wonder why a combat Marine vet has got tears in his eyes. He said, I'm not worried about my deployment. I'm not worried about getting hurt, you know, in Iraq. My main worry was about my family. And you took that worry off my plate. Thank you. So then we had send off, and then we had returns. This is our prayer board that we had. Next slide, please. Some ideas, you can all, you know, check in with the veterans when they return. Have a veteran do that typically. I would just call up and say, hey, soldier, how you doing over there? You know, if I'd have some coffee, I'm a Navy vet. Some would say, no, I'm doing good. Some would say, yeah, I'm doing, and then they call me up a week later, say, you know, I think I'd like to talk about some stuff. Welcome them into the faith community, provide job assistance with them. I had a guy who was coming back from Iraq, and he was unemployed, but he's applying for a job as a accountant. So I talked to my son's buddy was a partner in an accounting firm, and so he gave him mock interviews, asked them those tough questions so they wouldn't be surprised. Have support groups. We're doing that at Our Lady of Joy. Counseling and spiritual direction. We're doing that at Franciscan Renewal Center. Conduct veteran recognition events. That's a simple thing that churches can do. You know, just ask them. You have to do that on veterans on your church service before Veterans Day or whatever, and say, hey, how many veterans do we have? Have them say a prayer for them. Partner with other veteran organizations to help out, VFWs, other places, and refer them to appropriate resources. Arizona Coalition for Military Families Be Connected call line. Maybe what I should do, Ashley, is have you put the call line number. This is a number that anyone can call, veterans and non-veterans, to help out the veterans. Next slide. Just as some steps for forming the ministry, I also have a white paper I wrote, actually putting a link to a Google Doc that has that paper in it. But this is just a summary. You have to get one or two people passionate about helping the vets. Then, of course, pastor support. Sometimes you need the parish council, you know, to support it. Assemble some like-minded people. We just put an advertisement in the church bulletin, got together, assessed feasibility, decided what people had for interest. We decided that we wouldn't do any projects that we didn't have a leader for. So if somebody's suggesting a project and doesn't want to lead it, well, might not be one who'll do. There has to be some passion about it. And of course, practical funding and things like that. We identified a few military families, interviewed them to find out what their needs were. We prioritize the services. Everybody will come with great ideas, but you're just going to pick one or two to work with, because you just don't have the volunteers to do many more. Next slide. Another step, create a plan for approval by the pastor if required. We were required to do that. Make sure that the program had wheels on it. Publicize the ministry, start organizing. We had meetings every month. We had minutes. We did work in between. Just pick a high priority, make it happen. Be careful not to overtask everybody. Yes, we can, the slide deck, I'll be sending out an email to everybody, and I'll make a note to have that slide deck in there. Okay, next one. Now I want to tell you about an exciting program that we have in the Arizona Coalition. last June, we announced our faith-based network. What is that? It's an initiative to help to encourage faith communities to serve our over 500,000 veteran service members, and of course their families. We're probably looking at over 1 million people when you look at the veteran families and connect them. And so I'll be giving you a link to how you can learn more about this and how you can join in that faith network. It's very simple. Once you get on our email list, we send you information for training and other things that would help you. And we have videos and different things like that. Next slide. So what we're trying to do really in summary is raise a network, raise awareness, I should say, get people. We've got over 500 people on our email list from the faith communities now. Some are in ministry, some aren't. Some are just interested in helping vets. And then we are trying to get at least one person in every faith community trained on the Be Connected training. Next slide. These are the website. We also have this in the chat, but you can take a picture of that, I guess, if you want to, or whatever. That's the Be Connected 1-800 number. I've called it 20 times in the last 2 years. I've had all kinds of good success with it. So that's Connect at the coalition website for the Arizona for the veterans. Be Connected is connected Arizona coalition.org, and then our faith network is at www.connectveterans.org/faith. And I think Ashley is putting it in there now. So I believe that's the last slide. Once you hit the next one there for me and see if I'm right here. Okay, next slide. Is that it?
Yep.
Okay, thank you, Ashley. Why don't we go to any questions that might be here?
So
and you can probably
up in the chat. Anyone, if you have any questions, feel free to put it up.
Any chat questions?
As of yet.
And you can probably stop sharing, Ashley, on unless everybody probably has that now.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I've shared those resources, and I'll share the extra resources mentioned.
And let's see. Any chat questions? Ashley, maybe you can bring those up for me. I think you have your mute on.
There we go. Okay, we did get a question in there. So it's Lieutenant Amber Hertz, who would be a good contact on local bases to connect with for a faith organization?
What was that again?
So who would be a good contact on local bases to connect with for a faith organization?
Oh, actually, I'd be happy to help with that. And I'll put my contact information into the chat, so any of you can. I forgot to do that. Any of you can get that. Let me put that in right now. Through this work, I've been working on the veteran ministry stuff for probably 10 years now, about 5 of it in Arizona. And I have a whole bunch of contacts, so please engage me. Any other questions?
Looks like that's it for now.
Okay, well, thank you. So now what I would like to do is interview my friend Suzanne Tausig and give a little background on Suzanne here. She's a moderator, and she does more than moderation. She's an outstanding leader of the Military Veterans Ministry at Our Lady of Joy Church in Carefree, Arizona. She was commissioned an Army officer upon her graduation from Marquette University, served 7 years, leaving the service with the rank of captain. As a civilian, she has worked professionally in sales and marketing for major pharmaceutical companies and has held CEO positions in various manufacturing industries. She holds an MA degree from the University of Houston, currently pursuing her law degree in California. Suzanne's father was a refugee of World War II who came to this country and enlisted in the Army. He received the Bronze Star for his heroic effort in the Korean War. Both of her sons are graduated at West Point. One is a Black Hawk pilot and the other is an intelligence officer who's currently assigned as an assistant professor at West Point. Suzanne knows we can do better for our veterans and hopes to dedicate her time to veteran causes after she graduates from law school. Let me say a little bit about why Suzanne is going to law school. She wants to create a nonprofit to provide free legal services for veterans. She is actually going to go to law school to do that. It's a major commitment. You see why I love this lady. She's got the passion to really help veterans. So Suzanne, just like to ask you a couple questions. First of all, what drew you to starting the ministry at Our Lady of Joy?
Well, thank you for inviting me, Mike. I just wanted to thank you for making me a part of your life and also encouraging me on this journey that we have here with veterans. As Mike mentioned, my father was a war refugee. My parents were taken prisoners as children in World War II in Poland. My father and his family were sent to a Siberian labor camp because my grandfather was actually a Polish military officer. So he was considered a prisoner of war. When the Americans gave amnesty to the Russians, because the Russians were actually fighting with the Nazis at the time, they released my father and my father's family. So my father and my grandfather rejoined the Polish army because at that time, my father was already of soldiering age. So the Polish army joined with the British forces in Palestine. So my father was actually part of the Polish army in Palestine, but he was under the auspices of the British army. So technically he had served both with the Polish army and the British army as a very, very young teenager in World War II. After the war, my father was allowed to go to England, as was anyone who was aligned with the British army. He went to college in England, and then he said, you know what, I'm going to America. I need to start a new life. So as a 20-year-old man, came to America, got off the boat in the New York Harbor. First thing he did is he was asking people in his accent, with his then British accent, where can I find an army recruiting station? So he joined the American Army right away. Since he had spoken Polish and Russian, they made him an intelligence specialist and sent him to Korea. So during the Korean War, he was involved in a lot of secret missions that I didn't even know about until he was literally on his deathbed. And after he was gone, I was thinking about, you know, how nice would it have been if there had been, you know, someone who had similar experiences with him to have spoken with him about, to have people to have come and maybe relieved my sister and me of sitting with him for maybe an hour to get him to talk a little bit more about what he experienced, because the, you know, entire time, you know, as an adult, my relationship with him, he never spoke about what happened in Korea. And he only started to tell me, you know, bits and pieces when he was on his deathbed. And I just think that there was something missing there. And after his passing, I was starting law school, and I said, you know, wouldn't it be nice if we just had a little bit more services for veterans, you know, aging veterans, veterans who have no one to speak with, veterans who need legal services, veterans who need someone to sit with them when their families are exhausted. So I had just joined Our Lady of Joy parish, and I asked them when I registered, who's in charge of the veterans ministry, and they said, what veterans ministry? So I said, we need to do something about this. I had just retired. I had just buried, all of my parents, my husband's parents, started law school. And I said, wow, do I have time for this? So I really had to think and pray about, should I be the volunteer? Should I step up yet again and, start something this late in my career, at this age? And the answer was yes. So I approached the pastor of Our Lady of Joy Church with a plan. And I said, look, I think we can do this. How many veterans do you have? Well, they didn't know. I said, you don't know how many veterans you have? So I said, wow, this is going to be a project. So I said, well, let's just give it a shot. I asked them to throw a little piece in the weekly church bulletin. And then magically, mysteriously, Mike Wold came into my life. And Mike gave me the leadership himself as to how to get things going and a little bit about his background. And I felt confident that if we could just have a really good marketing campaign, and since I do have a marketing background, I thought, well, maybe we can do this. So I thought to myself, okay, how can we find out who our veterans are? So I said, well, let's just start with, Saturday and Sunday church services. So what we did over Veterans Weekend is we asked the parish pastor and his team to please bless the veterans at each of the services, at each of the masses. And they did. And we asked them to announce that, hey, the veterans ministry is out there and they have a little gift for you. So, we came up with small little gifts to give out. And we asked all our veterans to stop by our table in the courtyard. And, by the end of the weekend, we had about 75 people on that list. So at a minimum, we knew we had at least 75 veterans in our parish. So after we got that list going, we were able to start monthly meetings. And our meetings are generally on a Friday, generally the last Friday of the month. And we announce them 2 weeks prior. And it's like, hey, you want to come. If you can't, we understand. So we started to get about a dozen people show up for our meetings. And then our meetings basically morphed into a quarterly luncheon. So we had our first quarterly luncheon just about a month ago. And we were fortunate enough to get Miss Baker from the Arizona Department of Veterans Services to come and join us and do a talk. And then we had 30 veterans show up. So gradually we're building our veterans group. And there are a lot of different facets of this group. First of all, you have to have an advisory council. So we were fortunate enough where we have 6 people who are all veterans themselves who have volunteered to serve as an advisory council. I took on the position of moderator. So Mike is our point of contact for the Be Connected program. We have a retired full-bird Army colonel who is a nurse practitioner. So she kind of serves as our health advisor. We have another Vietnam Navy veteran who is part of the Veterans Last Patrol. And what they do is that they offer hospice sitting services for veterans who just need someone to sit with them while they're in hospice. If their families are, exhausted, if they just need a little bit more support. So Mike is a huge, Stephen is a huge help for us. We also have a veteran from Vietnam era as well, who was an Army, and he has a huge background in marketing as well, because he was actually chief marketing officer for Cancer Centers of America. So he knows how to get things started. He knows how to connect people. And he also serves on Arizona Governor Ducey's Council for Veterans. So he is a great resource to us as well. So we do have veterans who do have a little bit of time to share with us, and that's extremely important. And I know, Mike, you were going to ask, some of these questions, so I'm going to keep rambling if that's okay with you. regarding
Well, one
volunteer.
question I did have though, is I know it isn't easy. I saw you working hard on this. What were some of the challenges when you started the ministry?
Yeah.
I know you talked
So,
about some personal ones, but
yeah.
what
So,
can people expect to happen?
yeah. So I think one of the biggest challenges is really getting the veterans to come to you, to realize that we're a ministry and we're there for them. So we figure right now we have about 100 veterans within our parish. And, people are busy, people have lives, but I think the people who are being drawn in are the people who really need us. And that's the bottom line is, are you serving the people who need you? So that was one of the challenges, is getting everybody together, finding out who the veterans were. So that's how we did it. When I mentioned that we had during Veterans Weekend, we had prayers for the veterans and we gave out little gifts. That's what drew them in. Another issue too is volunteers, because Mike, as you mentioned earlier, everybody has great ideas, but you have to have a coordinator for these ideas. One person can't do it all. I myself as moderator, it's a lot of work. It really is. It's basically a part-time job. So that's a challenge. Another challenge too is funding. So, right now we haven't requested any money from anyone, but, as, spirituality would have it, I prayed a little bit saying, it'd be great if we could get funded somehow. And all of a sudden, a check for $1,000 from the Knights of Columbus, who do serve the military community on their own, appeared. People started throwing money at me when I was out there during Veterans Weekend, giving out gifts. And all of a sudden, all this money started showing up on my table. I'm like, where did this come from? So we don't have a formal fundraising program. But as we build our community, I'm sure that will change. Also, when we have our monthly meetings, we have to have some sort of a draw. So trying to find people who have the time to come and speak with us, that's a challenge too. But so far, we've been very fortunate by having Department of Arizona Services come and do a complete presentation. And then later on this month, we actually have an attorney who's actually based in Scottsdale, Arizona, but who is a national veteran lawyer, who's also a veteran advocate, come and speak to us, because there are new issues with the VA and new benefits and new medical conditions that have manifested that are now eligible for some VA benefits. So he's going to come and speak to us about that. A lot of our veterans, they have questions about, who do I contact at the VA? What do I do to get medications? How can I qualify? What benefits does my wife have when I pass, or what benefits does my husband have if I pass? Burial benefits, TAPS. I mean, people just don't know how to get these services. So we feel that as a ministry, it's very important to be able to serve both the social welfare and the spiritual welfare. So that's where we are right now.
Oh, Suzanne, I really appreciate that. Suzanne is just inspiration for me. And you heard the story of her family and everything else. I promised that I'd have my Marine vet friend Beckett talk a little bit about his story, and you'll see, based on what Suzanne has said, we are already inspiring. A veteran contacted the church, and he had just lost his wife, and the grief counselor said connect with the veteran ministry. So we set him up with somebody to have coffee with him. It's been very helpful. He's going to be an active member. So there's just stuff that's already there. So Beckett, maybe you could thank you, Suzanne, and we'll try to still have some little time after Beckett for questions. But Beckett, tell a little bit about your journey in faith.
Yeah, thanks, Mike. I appreciate it. Appreciate you having me here today. So for me, I joined the Marine Corps right out of high school, and I was deployed to the first Gulf War back in 1991. And what helped me a lot, that's when my faith and my Marine Corps, my military training and everything started coming together. So I would attend services occasionally, even starting with boot camp all the way through my time in the Marine Corps. But once we deployed, I felt that need to reconnect. So I reached out, kind of like what one of your power presentations said, Mike, to our chaplain, to the chaplain that was assigned to our unit. And that helped me quite a bit. And I became so connected with them that I became the point of contact for our unit to our chaplain. So once I got out of the Marine Corps in the mid 90s, I kind of I came back here to Phoenix and started getting back into kind of some of my old ways. I turned to alcohol for relief. I was self-medicating. I started hanging out with probably not the greatest group of people that were encouraging that type of behavior. And so I started using that as an excuse to just kind of push the world away. I was very angry, very isolated. And I was in that space for probably a good 10 years or so before I finally got back on track with my faith. And so I reconnected. I just by chance, I happened to be reading a Daily Bread at my work. And a lady that I worked with saw me reading it during lunch and invited me to go check out her son's church, which is Pure Heart Church over off of 43rd Avenue and Thunderbird area by ASU West Campus. And I've been going there since about 98, 99 for quite some time now. I've been involved with the teaching Sunday school. I've been involved with the men's ministry. And one of the biggest things that's helped me that my wife and I were doing some counseling together some years back. And I was referred to the combat trauma healing group. And that was like a pivotal moment for me because that allowed me to get connected with other veterans as well. And so those are meetings that take place across the valley. There are some meetings that happen on Tuesday evenings, some on Sundays. The group I belong to is on Thursday nights at Church at Arrowhead. And so, yeah, that's what helps me to be around other veterans and express my faith in a safe place where we can talk about not just things we're dealing with in life, but how we can open up and talk to each other and lift each other up spiritually. Like, hey, here's what we're dealing with, but how can we get beyond that and be better for our community, not just for ourselves, but for our family, for our friends, and for our coworkers and the community in general. So that's what faith has done for me. It's given me my life back.
Oh, thank you so much. Thank you so much, Beckett. And I really honor our long friendship. And Beckett and I have worked with veterans. He's dedicated himself to help any way he can. Were there any questions, Ashley, before? We only have about a minute to go, I guess, so we might have to answer some after.
We did have one other pop up right before the interviews started, and they were asking, do you have a presentation to share with ministry in our community?
Yes, we do. And you can, I'm happy to, we have other people in the Be Connected network that will provide presentations. So just contact me at my email address, and we'd love to come into a faith community or to a small group or whatever and talk.
And I also just resources that you had sent me to share with everyone, so everyone can
yes, there are a number of resources from different sources that faith communities can use. So Ashley's going to share those.
Yes, I just put it in the chat box, so it's there if you want to grab those before we can.
Crew Military, American Bible Society. A lot of the faith communities we work with don't know where these are, etc. So at any rate, that's good. And we'll be coming out with an email afterwards, which will also repeat these links so that you'll have those. Okay.
All right, and then I will also be putting in a quick survey link if anyone would like to take that to let us know any thoughts on the session. And then we'll have a short break now, and then you can pop on to the last briefing of the day, which starts at 10:05.
Thanks so much thanks Suzanne, Beckett, thank you. Thank you. Trevor has been behind the scenes, and then of course Ashley's been helping too. So thank you so much. Hope you enjoy the rest of the symposium. Bye-bye.